It is an oft-repeated mistake among students and sometimes practitioners of politics to assume that to rule is merely to exercise power. The error is in the assumption that there is only a practical force to the process, when in fact, as with all energies, there is as much importance in how the thing is conveyed. We saw, in the latest European age of revolutions, the logical conclusion of the humanist principle, the upending of the ancient pillars of authority, and the establishment of a fundamentally Jacobin understanding of politics. It has been assumed by practically every state since that point that a ruler exists only to provide anchorage to various confused forces, each seeking a point of support. In this way, it is not true that those regimes which aligned themselves rhetorically with ideas of order in the last few centuries did so in real terms. The most common form of rightist regime simply supplanted the monarchical principle without ever resurrecting it, sometimes even with the aesthetics and trappings of monarchy. Those regimes rested not on any necessary transcendent principle, but instead upon a solely technical and democratic basis, always with a fallible and vulgar principle somewhere among the critical foundations. The proof of this error is borne out in the sudden and total loss of authority when the vulgar principle inevitably fails, a process which Evola once compared to the loss of magnetic current, so dramatic is the metamorphosis. But in an age such as this, when there are no really sacred institutions, and when what is called rationality has been the dominant philosophical creed for so long, what sense is there in calling for some sudden turn back to the transcendent right? Conversely, we must remember that there has never been a political system quite free of faith and irrational belief. A purely political system is in fact a contradiction in terms, made invalid by the constitution of man. And from this civilization, built upon technical ways and means, submerged in the problems of mass and scale, comes to us a peculiar advantage, that of evident contrast. Technical civilization, or pre-technical civilization, both present the same fundamental fact, that what we call tradition, the ancient forms of authority, are only expressions of the constant need for sacred, transcendent principles in politics. That to rule is not simply to occupy an office, a slightly higher notch on the pole of bureaucratic functionaries, but to embody in some mystic way the reason and force of the law, whilst also providing the orientation towards that which is above us, that which in some way provides the structure to existence. Indeed, the problem is not so much one of ideology, but of a general and deeply felt nihilism, a nihilism that will not simply be swept away by aesthetics or a change in the structure of the regime. The resurrection of authority will not be achieved until the West has found some way to reinvigorate the spiritual understandings on which it rests. We are optimistic enough to suggest that this will likely occur around, above, and with the continuation of the technical age. Thus, the authentic monarchy is that polity which overcomes its own human problems. It is the expression of a mystic whole, the emblazonment of a community as symbolized by a crown, and most often containing many others. Those men that embody it are almost irrelevant in a personal sense, dwarfed by the majesty of the throne they occupy. All peoples, whether or not they acknowledge it, desire that dignity and significance that comes with the presentation of a king, themselves embodied beyond man, by man, the crown being the seal stamped against the uncertainty and disorder of blank existence. All those states which codify themselves on the principles of what they call the people do themselves a great injustice, and inevitably lay down the reasons for their own demise. All democratic republics die, eventually, of indignity. Those romantic, perhaps cliched, but nevertheless prurient expectations to serve, to die for, to represent, and to honour remain in place, but no polity will very long accept these questions being answered by the meagre presence of a functionary, or a president, or a civil non-entity. What fairy tale of the ages ever began, "Once upon a time there was a president"?